Week one of Dallas Cowboys OTAs is in the books, and I do believe there's already a winner and there's already a loser. We'll break it down tonight on primetime. Let's get to it. Here we go. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with you guys in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But tonight, we are live, and we are enjoying those even more now with the new programming that we've got here for primetime, because I get to talk to you guys for a little bit longer. I get to interact with you guys in the comments, so make sure you say hi, hit the like button for me if you enjoyed the show. Let's talk some Cowboys OTAs, because week one is apparently in the books based off the initial dates that they gave us. And I feel like even though it's too early and we don't know much about what is going on in these practices, because it's not like training camp when there's so many eyeballs on what's going on the field, I feel like we've already learned significant things. And I specifically could point to a winner and to a loser out of week one of OTAs. Now, not necessarily because of what's going on the field, but also for what's not going on the field. I'll explain that when we get specifically to the loser later on the show. But first, shout out to everyone in the comments, man. We've got Holly, we've got Toxic, Isidro out there, we've got Joe. Shout out to everyone, man. Thank you so much for joining the show tonight. Let's get to it, man. Let's get right into it. My big winner from week one of OTAs, it's got to be, and you can tell me if you have a different name that you would go with, but I believe it's got to be Jalen Brooks. Not Tolbert, Jalen Brooks. That is not to say that Tolbert is a loser or anything of the sort. But CeeDee Lamb, as you know, is not around for OTAs, right? The Cowboys and CeeDee are still negotiating. They've got that contract dispute going on. CeeDee is away. He's likely not going to show up to mandatory minicamp. We'll see if he shows up to the start of training camp. Regardless of how you feel about that, I believe it's very likely we don't see him when the moment comes. But because CeeDee Lamb is not around, that means there's at least one more spot for a wide receiver to work with the first team offense. Now, you've got Brandon Cooks, obviously. You've got Jalen Tolbert, who is the projected number 3 wide receiver of this offense. And then you've got Jalen Brooks eating into those first team reps, gone from a 7-round rookie in 2023 to now working with the ones 1 year later. And I specifically would list him as a winner, not just because of that, but because of the fact that it seems like Ryan Flournoy, the 5th-round rookie, is not eating into those reps. The fact that Jalen Moreno-Cropper, some of the other second-year guys that were UDFAs, are not eating into those reps. Kevontae Turpin seemingly not eating into those reps. Now, they might here and there, but even when Mike McCarthy talked to the media during the press conference ahead of the first week of OTAs, Mike McCarthy specifically mentioned both Jalens, right? Tolbert and Brooks. We've got 3 Jalens in the wide receiver room if we include Jalen Moreno-Cropper. But okay, Tolbert and Cooks were the 2 guys that Mike McCarthy singled out as players that were being benefited because of CeeDee Lamb's absence and that were looking well in practice thanks to, working with those ones, with that first team rep. Now, I wouldn't make too much out of his possibilities for wide receiver 3 as of yet, but it might be worth it, putting it out there, right? Say Jalen Brooks continues progressing at the rate that he seemingly is. Keep in mind, Jalen Brooks did not play a whole lot, at least of offense, in 2024. He had 7 games, logged very few offensive snaps. But I think what he's building upon, he's building upon what he did last year in training camp, in the offseason, when he was turning heads in the summer, and there was no doubt he was going to make the roster by the end of training camp, right? We all knew, okay, Jalen Brooks is actually going to make it as a 7th-round draft pick, and there is no question about it. Now, if Jalen Brooks is getting these reps, if Jalen Brooks is getting these looks, and he's so, in a different level from the rest of the wide receiver room, is there a scenario where he lights it up in training camp and suddenly it's not Jalen Tolbert, the undisputed number 3 wide receiver, but at the very least, a rotation between the two Jalens? We're getting ahead of ourselves here, granted, but I do believe that, and this ties back to Tolbert's whole situation. Tolbert has just over 20 career catches. And I've mentioned this number time and time again on Primetime, and I'm not doing so to knock on Tolbert. I'm doing so to really illustrate how little we know about Jalen Tolbert at the end of the day. So I'm looking forward to seeing that competition during the offseason, and specifically as we get deeper and deeper into it. Right now in OTAs, okay, he's getting a chance with the ones. Let's see what he does with that. But then when the Pats come on in training camp, what can Jalen Brooks do to further separate himself and maybe get into that wide receiver 3 situation? Because right now, I would pencil him in as wide receiver 4 pretty confidently based on those comments from Mike McCarthy and based from what the reporters that have been with their boots on the ground have told us about those opening practices, where everyone is like, okay, Brooks is getting those first team reps while CeeDee Lamb is away. So we'll see, man. We'll see. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Let's see what happens moving forward with the wide receivers. Let's see some of your comments, though, around here. We've got Isidro who says, Cooks, Turpin is looking good, says Isidro. And, man, Brandon Cooks, they've talked about those deep balls. I think that's going to be the big story of the offseason. Obviously, Brandon Cooks in 2023 had that slow start with the Cowboys, and then mid-season when the Cowboys really started leaning into the passing game, you started seeing some very top-notch performances from Brandon Cooks. But that deep ball was never really there, which was what really got us excited about Brandon Cooks in the first place when the Cowboys traded for him. We all were thinking about, now they've got this deep, big play specialist that is going to give those bombs from Dak Prescott, and they never quite connected in those. We'll see how that changes in 2024. Hopefully it does. Right now, though, seems like Jalen Tolbert and Brandon Cooks, they're working very closely together. Jalen Tolbert talked to the media, and he specifically mentioned Brandon Cooks as somebody that was taking him under his wing. We've seen the videos on social media of them working together. So obviously he's got that advantage as well in the fact that the team is betting on him to be number 3 in this offense. When the Zay Jones thing happened, it seemed like they were maybe trying to chop for an insurance policy. Right now, I don't know what that looks like for the Cowboys, right? Because there's not a lot of free agents out there that you can bet on, especially not anything else other than a role player. Like, for example, Hunter Renfrow remains available in free agency, but he's likely just like a slot guy, right? And he's limited in that sense, which probably is what led to him not turning out as good as we thought he was with the Raiders. But anyways, I do think right now if the Cowboys want to add some depth to the wide receiver room, it's got to be via the trade market, probably a lesser known name, late round draft pick that you can invest in the position to try to get better. And again, get an insurance policy, not exactly somebody that would come in and be number 3 on this offense. Because again, I do believe the Cowboys are betting on Tolbert to be that. Let's see here. Toxic says, Mo, how is it possible that our head coach gained more weight than our defensive tackle room? And Mike McCarthy did joke about his weight in the press conference. He was like, man, I don't want to talk about my weight. When they asked him about Mazi Smith, we'll see how Mazi Smith shows up. Obviously, him not being around is like a big question mark because of the offseason surgery. We'll see, man. We'll see. But anyways, let's move on, though. Let's move on a little bit here on the show. And let's talk about who I would consider the loser 1 week of OTAs into the offseason. It's only 1 week, and there's definitely time to make up for this, especially training camp. But the fact that Luke Schoonmaker is not around because of another injury is simply not great. It simply is not. Let me know if Schoonmaker's injury, in your view, is a big deal, small deal, or no deal. Let me know what you make out of this whole situation in the chat. I'm intrigued for your thoughts. I want to see what you guys have to say. But hear me out. When Luke Schoonmaker got to the Cowboys last year, he was dealing with a foot injury. After the season, he received shoulder injury. And now it's a hamstring injury that is keeping him off the field for OTAs. Here's my big thing. Like, I'm not saying that Schoonmaker is going to suck forever and ever or anything like that. I don't want to be controversial like that at all. But we've heard tirelessly coaches, like we've heard it time and time again, coaches tell us that, hey, during the regular season and once we get to the season, there's just not a lot of time for development. By then, you're just thinking of installing the game plan, getting your team ready to go, and getting ready for game day. There's very, very little time to really hone in on the details of the position in order to develop. The OTAs aspect of it, and Mike McCarthy even talked about this, is specifically important for young players who are going into the classroom, going over an install of a play, going over an install of a concept, getting all of those notes down on their notebooks, and then translating that on the playing field when they hit the playing field. It's not about getting competitive yet. That happens until training camp when the pads come on. It's all in that moment. It's all about, okay, I'm learning what I have to do in this play, what I have to do in this scenario, and then I'm going to go through the motions on the playing field. When you look at players that don't pan out in the NFL, there's a lot of those guys that cannot get the work in the off seasons because they're hurt. So I do believe that being hurt in your first couple of off seasons in the NFL is at least a small deal. I want to say a big deal specifically for him because of the situation of the tight end room, where the Cowboys are not exactly in a rush to get him back because they've got Jake Ferguson, they've got John Stephens Jr., who they really like, and they've got UDFA that they paid $245,000 guaranteed this year to land him, and I'm talking about Brevin Spanford, and you still got Peyton Hendershot. I do think this gets in the way of Luke Schoonmaker to regain that tight end 2 role. I do think that is not guaranteed for him at this point. Now, he's expected to be ready to go for training camp, so he's got all of the power to change this narrative once we get to late July. He could do it. Absolutely could. But he's behind schedule for the second consecutive year. And at least that is a story. Absolutely it is, in my view. And Jay Recruiter says Massey is hurt too. And Massey, him missing time right now could also be something comparable to Luke Schoonmaker. But what I believe really makes Schoonmaker a loser in this situation is that Massey is competing against absolutely no freaking body. Like, Massey Smith is your starting nose tackle in 2024 because you don't have any other option. The Cowboys have options, though, at tight end. And I believe for him specifically, it is a big deal. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, for him to develop and all that, maybe he can still catch up. But him missing OTAs for the second consecutive year, and this is the thing, it's another injury, right? Like, now you start getting into this conversation that you're like, okay, like, he's been hurt for several reasons now. He's been hurt in several areas now. Is this going to be a thing? And hey, hurt guys in the NFL are not a new thing. So now that also becomes a little bit of a concern. And again, it's not exactly like he lit it up as a rookie. So it's a conversation. I'm hoping he turns it around. I'm hoping he gets to training camp and hits the ground running, right? And he shows us a different side of him. We've already seen some good stuff from him as a rookie, right? Like a run blocker, he had several good moments as well. So, hey, maybe he turns it around. But I think we at least have something to talk about there. So some red lights, flashing at least a little bit. But let's get into some of your comments, man, and let's see what you guys think. Because I see a little bit of everything. Like I see Holly ready to cut Schoonmaker, which seems a little bit too premature for me, Holly. I will say that. Schoon gotta go, he says in the comments. Jay says no deal. There's too much invested. Nada que ver, says Toxic, right? Like, not at all. No deal. Bruce says, hit the like button or be cursed to have Schoonmaker's endurance. Toxic Tom says, no deal, but with a caveat. He says, this is status quo in Dallas, punting second-round picks on cripples or felons. So Toxic, as his username suggests, is being toxic out there. Asmodeo says, big deal. Isidro says, all his injuries will also affect Schoon's confidence. Leon L says, small deal. He's not counted on. It's only a deal because he was a second-round pick, which, hey, I'm fine with that. So I would park in small deal for the team, big deal for Luke Schoonmaker, right? From his POV, it's a big deal right now. It's a big deal right now, I would say. Bruce says, will the Cowboys cut a high draft pick that doesn't work out before it's too late? I will also admit, I don't think we're at that point yet. I cannot be at that point after 1 year. I need to see more. I at least need to see that second year, right? Especially when my coach is London Wells and he's out there developing tight ends like crazy. I am not at that point yet. I will say that. I am at a point, however, when I'm not giving him the tight end 2 job because of roster politics, right? That second round draft pick that I used on him is not enough for me to make him tight end 2 if I'm running the team. He's got to earn it, and he's got to really be better than some of these other guys like, Jake Ferguson. He's solidified as tight end 1. But I mean, Brevin Spanford, who I know is a UDFA. We don't know much about him yet. Peyton Hendershot, John Stephens Jr., I believe, is like the big-time wild card in this conversation because we've already seen him light it up in the preseason, and we've already heard the Cowboys say that they love John Stephens Jr., so we'll see how that plays out. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, some more notes out of OTAs. I don't think there's a lot to say yet. Obviously, we're just getting to hear some of these reporters put out information for us. People who got the boots on the ground. We've heard a lot of good stuff from Marshawn Nealand. There's a couple of clips already going viral on social media where Marshawn Nealand looks explosive as heck. And we're not going to really get to enjoy that until the Pats come on, because when the Pats come on, now Marshawn Nealand can really show you how violent his hands are, how strong he is, how he can hold his own even against NFL caliber athletes. So that is going to be super exciting when we get there. In the meantime, though, interesting stuff that has happened. I would point towards the Trey Lance situation. Talked a little bit about it during the week, but in case you missed those shows, Trey Lance seems like he's going to be playing the vast majority of preseason games. Now, should not be a surprise for anyone paying attention, right? The Cowboys already know enough about Cooper Rush. This is the year where you got to see more of Trey Lance. McCarthy talked about giving him more reps. He talked about that is what he needs. And he said that, the design of this offseason is to have Trey Lance be or take a very large part, is a wording that he used in the Cowboys preseason. And I do believe that might change a little bit how the Cowboys approach August. Usually they don't play a lot of starters, right? Dak Prescott has never played a preseason down of football since Mike McCarthy took over as head coach in 2020. Last year, we did not see any of the starting offensive linemen, and that includes Tyler Smith, who was in his second year in the NFL. So I believe the Cowboys might change a little bit of that if they want to evaluate Trey Lance, and you're going to get only a few opportunities to do so in a game-like situation and a game-like scenario. Do you want to throw him out there with, say, maybe not Zach Martin, but maybe, obviously in this case, it's going to be Cooper Beebe and it's going to be Tyler Guyton because those guys also need the reps. But why not toss him out there with, say, Tyler Smith, and maybe Terrence Steele as well, or maybe at least just Terrence Steele. Just don't give him these like group of 5 backup offensive linemen, and maybe play Brandon Cooks, maybe play Jalen Tolbert. I mean, playing Jalen Tolbert would make a lot of sense to me, at least in the preseason. So I do wonder if they're going to really switch it up. But I also wonder, what is it going to look like when we get to training camp and the joint practices if the Cowboys actually do any of those, right? When they get into these intense scrimmages, when they're playing against each other, does Trey Lance get some first team looks? I do wonder about that. Dak was very open when he talked about Trey. He said that, hey, Trey is pushing me a little bit, right? He's motivating me. So I keep him at bay of the first team reps. But are we gonna see Trey Lance eat into that playing time when it's first team offense versus another NFL team in the summer? Want to find out about that a little bit more. And then there was a big statement made from Dak Prescott that obviously went viral on social media. There's been a lot of articles written about it. By the way, you can check my articles out on atozsports.com/Dallas. But Dak Prescott was asked about how he can be so patient with the contract negotiations, right? He's only signed through 2024. There's not exactly momentum going on to get a deal done. And in fact, there are reports out there that indicate no real offer has been made. And Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones are saying we are in no rush. So how does Dak Prescott stay patient? How does he show up to OTAs? How does he show zero inclination into holding out at any point of this offseason? And Dak's response was pretty strong. It was pretty powerful. He said, and I quote, "I don't play for money. Never have, never cared for it, to be honest with you. I would give it up just to play this game." Those are big words for a player in an industry where contract values for his position are exceeding $50 million per year. And I absolutely know that there are going to be people out there that doubt Dak's words, right? Because people are going to be like, well, why does he not take a discount then? Why does he not play for less money? Why does he not pull off a Tom Brady? And I understand that line of thinking, but also what Dak is trying to say, and I think he's backed it up, is he really and genuinely lips it up to his agents, like all of it. And it got me to a point where I'm like, yeah, this guy was never going to hold out. And I speculated about him potentially holding out because I believed he could, right? He has all of the leverage in the world. He could have held out for at least OTAs, maybe. And, maybe he could do it later in the offseason theoretically. But I do think like these kind of comments really indicate that he's never going to do that. And what I mean with the fact that he's backed it up, when he was franchise stacked back in 2020, he never hesitated. Like he showed up to every practice. He was around, right? Played the entire season. There was never any threat of Dak Prescott being like, yep, I'm holding out to negotiate this thing. He is so willing to bet on himself because he is so willing to just focus on playing football. And I think that was pretty interesting from him. I do believe he's always been very stoical about how he handles business, right? He never lets anything, get to him. Doesn't seem, at least seemingly so, does not take it personal, which he talked about. But first he said, I allow that to the business people to say what it's worth, what they're supposed to give a quarterback of my play, a person of my play, a leader of my play. And for me, it's about controlling what I can control and handling that part, and the rest will take care of itself. This is what I mean with the fact that he's backed it up before. He's already done this. Like he's already let it take care of its own. And even though he suffered a season-ending injury, he still became the highest-paid quarterback in the NFL at the time back in 2021. And then he added, I don't take things personal. The understanding that at this point, I have a lot of decision in this too. That's a big statement too. I'll get to that in a minute. I have a lot of say too. It's about understanding business is business. And for me, as I said, it's about controlling what I can. And that's making sure I'm the best player that I can be right now. I think Dak alluded to his leverage a little bit there, right? Like, hey, I've got a say in this too. Obviously, that could mean that if he wants to accept a deal, he can just let his agents know. But I also kind of took it as he also has a say in whether he wants to stay or not, right? Like in whatever offer he's made, he's going to have a say at the end of the day. I like it. I like Dak's statement right there. And I do believe it's kind of like a fair comment to make. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, well, yeah, if you say that, why don't you take a hometown discount and all that? But I don't think that's what Dak was trying to say. Dak was just trying to say, I'm going to play football. If I'm under contract, I'm going to show up. I'm going to play. I'm going to do my thing. And I guarantee you a deal is going to come, whether it's from the Cowboys, whether it's from somebody else in 2025, which is something he alluded to earlier in the offseason. Dak is comfortable betting on himself. Respect. I think there would be other NFL quarterbacks that if they were going through what Dak is going through, they maybe would have held out at least for the first week of OTAs. Maybe they would have been a little bit more hostile in contract negotiations. Maybe not like Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, but maybe somewhere in between. The thing is, we don't really know because NFL teams don't let things get to this stage that often in the first place, right? All of these QBs are getting extended ahead of time. Not Dak Prescott, though. Not even Jared Goff had to wait as long as Dak Prescott is waiting for this thing to happen. We'll see what happens, man. I'm still holding out hope that the Cowboys extend his contract before the season starts because that feels a little bit like the deadline. There is not going to be a deadline via an NFL rule, but chances are agents and Dak are going to be like, hey, we can negotiate up until kickoff. And then once that is going on, we can kiss this thing goodbye until March next year or something like that. We'll see, man. We'll see. Toxic Tom says, I have worked around high net worth people who only play for money, won't last in a world like the NFL. You need a lot more than I want money to last this long. That's what he meant, which it's a totally, totally good point, right? I don't think people realize sometimes like the commitment that it is needed to play at the NFL level, right? It's not about being talented. It's about being able to put the work in, make many, many life sacrifices, and put your body through so much. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. Do me a favor, hit the like button for me. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you next week on the show, live Sunday, 8 p.m. Central. Thank you so much, and we'll talk more very, very soon. Bye-bye.